Hello everyone, good morning cats and kittens, or afternoon, whatever the case may be. Quick disclaimer before we jump into this. I want to make it very clear, this is not an explanation of how to play the rules. This is me reading the rulebook aloud at a leisurely pace and commenting on it. I've not played this game yet, I've only played the original, which is wonderful. I love Claustrophobia, it's one of my favorite games. And from what we understand, this new version will have very similar rules, but I'm not explaining to you, from the perspective of someone who's already played this new version, how the rules work. We're just reading the rules together, and I may comment some as well at a leisurely pace. That's what this is. So don't get upset with me expecting something else. We are just reading the rulebook. Let's jump into it. We have our table of contents here. Looks pretty awesome. On the left, we have a new version of the Condemned Brute. Obviously, everything is redone with this new version. The original had different art, different style. Still same premise and theme, but it's more fleshed out in this version, is the understanding I have. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's continue on. This is the fluff, which also means flavor text in my approximation for the game, which means that if you're not interested in that, skip ahead a little bit. I'll see if I can tinker with including a link so that you can skip right to where the rules in proper start. But here is kind of the prelude, so I'll read that now. The underworld has always been paved. The story begins in Prague, May 23rd, 1618, during a meeting with King Matthias I, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire and King of Bohemia. Representatives of the Protestant religion were flung out of a window. Negotiations had rarely ended so badly. Even though a dung heap saved those people from certain death, the aggression lit the fuse of an already volatile situation. This situation, ripe for a bloody war, had a name: Europe. The conflicts between the Reformists and Catholics were numerous and ran deep. They were also conducive to the multifaceted and complex political struggles that were shaking the continent. All the dynastic, family, religious, and popular tensions accumulated, adding fuel to a particularly bloody war. Paying these irregular troops quickly became an issue. Led by captains whose allegiances were often just for the money, they plunged the affected areas into a bloodbath. Absence of pay often meant devastation and plundering. The payment of their stipend was sometimes not enough to rein in these soldiers. The conflict evolved, changing ground according to the political conditions. Death followed wherever it went. There were hundreds of thousands of victims, perhaps even 1 million souls struck down. It was in this context of iron and powder that the German city of Magdeburg was besieged. Strategic city and Protestant bastion, Magdeburg was taken by storm in 1631 by a certain commander Tilly, a Catholic Brabant, forgive me if my pronunciation is wrong, who struggled to retain his troops. Propaganda or reality, the ensuing massacre and fire decimated 5 out of every 6 inhabitants. These festivities were spread over several days. In time, strange reports got back to the officers. In the waves of the Elbe, the river that crosses the martyred city, disturbing green glimmers could be seen. The phenomenon soon grew. According to the occultists and other esotericists sent to investigate, there was no doubt about it. It was a portal. But where did it lead? In order to find out, soldiers were sent beyond this terrifying threshold, which was now on the surface of the river. A roughly made crane first permitted boats to pass through it. Those returning from the expeditions were wild-eyed, wounded, and on the brink of madness. Men talked about landscapes of suffering that were quite impossible to conceive. Herds of grotesque creatures armed with claws and fangs descended upon them. Among these pitiful minions were the puppeteers of death, abominable in appearance and deeds, who served as their commanders. The doctors in demonology and religion who accompanied them pondered the discoveries they made in this strange subterranean realm. In order to fully understand this hostile reception, we must place ourselves into the head and hooves of a demon who, while quietly leading their flock throughout the underworld, happened upon these furious, half-demented soldiers. The humans' sudden arrival in the demonic strata was an unwelcome and perplexing surprise. As the underworld struggled to organize itself, discord reigned supreme. Larger, better-prepared expeditions allowed the mortals to push back these creatures. If the surprise effect had first played in their favor, musket bursts soon pushed them back, wailing and disorganized. Their demonic shepherds were forced to withdraw. Quickly, the humans set up a camp and explored the immediate surroundings. The mortal patrols plunged deeper into the tortured plains and mountain ranges, worthy of a delirious Hieronymus Bosch painting. Among these stunned doctors, several were inquirers into the great work of alchemy. They discovered elements of the First Order in these impious lands, unsuspected regions that made great leaps forward possible in their field of study. Several people speculated that it was in hell that they would find the prima materia, a fantasized substance, the ultimate key to producing the Philosopher's Stone. The rumors swelled in hell just as much as in Europe. Wealth had been discovered in Magdeburg, or at least something of prime importance there was taking place. If the discovery of the underworld did not solve the land conflicts, it at least slowed them down. No one was really safe from an attack while leaving a church or a temple, but the troops converged progressively toward the portal of Magdeburg. Through fragile alliances, a painful, rather uncertain calm settled in Europe. Those with power looked above all to carve a share of the tremendous riches that the underworld represented. The greater the number of thrones that joined the invading forces, the more their thrusts destabilized the demonic ranks, allowing the settlers to strengthen their position. The underworld's center attacked without any real cohesion. The conflicts in that undermine mortals are, at worst, a few decades old. The demonic hostilities date from the fall. Thousands of years ago, in this invasion, the demonic captains saw a means of gathering a little power. Others turned their legions against their superiors. Some separated and joined the ranks of the lost, those creatures without master or laws who carved out areas within the underworld. Chaos reigned, so much that the humans had the opportunity to claim a whole bank of the river Styx, at least a fairly substantial part, enough to found, in 1634, a functional colony, a real city. This they baptized New Jerusalem. It was rather ironic. Upon the soil of a massacre, on the ruins of a martyred city, the foundations of a holy city were thrown down. Mortal forces joined together to lead this walled city, whose population was a haphazard mixture of mercenaries, ordinary people, former criminals in search of a new life, and the servants, more or less well-intentioned, of powerful noble families. It was this formidable fortress that human armies ventured into hell. The demons and the fallen angels had at last organized themselves in order to hold back these unwelcome intruders who have their place here, but only after their death. This alliance, undermined by dissent, centuries-old conspiracies, and millennial rivalries, was against the settlers, but failed to dislodge them. But it is another story that really interests us. New Jerusalem has a sky of rocks and a ceiling of sulfur, towards which it raised its spires and prayers. For foundations, It has an impious network of tunnels and passages. The leaders of the city discovered with astonishment that swarms of troglodytes, small hungry creatures equipped with claws and sharp fangs, were likely to spring at any time to slay and remove city dwellers. Even worse, demons were seen in the deepest shadows, leading these monstrosities. The threat was real. Who knew what Machiavellian plan these horrors could weave under the holy city? Because of the frequent disappearances and murders, the leaders made a hasty decision to send able-bodied men into these black and fetid bowels. But what fool would venture there on their own accord? A solution was self-evident. The jails of New Jerusalem were crowded with criminals. Most were exiled or executed. It was quickly decided to enlist them to explore the underground tunnels, with a knight leading them, a man of absolute piety, a redeemer. Armed with a hammer, forged with faith, this holy man guided these condemned convicts, brutes and scouts, to purify the depths of the city. It was a fierce struggle that took place in the darkness. The brother and his condemned convicts very quickly understood that the demonic creatures were organized and were looking to burn New Jerusalem to ashes. As it turned out, grim invocations and interdimensional portals were not their only powers. A fierce battle started. The human forces secured victory, but at what cost? Many redeemers lost their lives, allowing their allies to push back the troglodytes and the demonic masters. Some creatures, including Kardakaya, a powerful scaled entity, attempted to take advantage of the humans. Among the troops who fought against these creatures, swordswomen and guardians, mighty warriors who forged a bond of sisterhood during the bloodshed, proved to be the most worthy. New Jerusalem was safe, but for how long? 9 years have passed. This is a considerable lapse of time for mortals who have consolidated their position and are about to get their hands on the prima materia. 9 years for the underworld is nothing but a breath, and for heaven, a flutter of the eyelids. The occultists and theologians had warned the colonists. Human flesh and blood had no place here. Accounts of demented messengers told of angels seen above the city of Dis, in the depths of the underworld. This was how far the arrogance of mortals had led them. These angelic appearances coincided with an onslaught of vicious demons. But now these quarrels seemed to be over, at least for a moment. Demonic hosts gathered millions of creatures. What ramparts besides those of the mighty Dis could resist such power? These years have been used to equip and prepare the patrols that explored the tunnels beneath New Jerusalem. They kept the troglodytes at bay, and with considerable efforts, pushed back the demons. However, the tunnels were stirring. The rock oozed putrid fluids. The deepest bowels pulsated with regenerated life. In the shadows, something gathered its strength and called for support, preparing itself. The year is 1643. In the darkness, blood will flow once more. Awesome. That's the end of that flavor text. Sorry, I'm a little bit not reading so well today, but hopefully that was still kind of interesting. It was very interesting to me because in terms of flavor and fluff, it means that we've gone 9 years since the first Claustrophobia. So the scenarios in the first one, which you can play each of them one-off, you don't have to play as a campaign. But in terms of flavor, they are a campaign. It looks like it's going to be the same one with this game. Also, it seems that many of the scenarios were taken from the first game and from its expansion, which means that in order for the flavor text to kind of make sense so it didn't feel like there was a time loop, I'm sure some of the fluff and flavor was tweaked. So thematically, it's different people, different group, different thing. Maybe they're doing a similar mission. But in terms of strict canon or theme or story, we are now in a new groups of people. It's also clear that the Redeemer, rather than being one individual person is like a class of people. Sorry about that. Let me silence my cell phone. It's a bit rude of me. That they are a class of people, like a paladin or a crusader, perhaps. So that's cool to me. I like that a lot, and that makes sense to me also. Something that I've always liked a lot from the original game, and this as well, is the idea that these condemned criminals, who knows if they're thieves or murderers or other horrible things, or all of the above, that they, it's implied, have a chance to redeem themselves, either by dying in battle or fighting and surviving. But either way, they're killing demons, so they are, in a sense, redeeming themselves. Also, they're not named, whereas the Redeemer at least is named in the sense of being of central importance. But everyone is just called by their title, Brute or Redeemer or whatnot. Kind of a sense of, your name's not important. What you do here is important. And you're just one more person who may die. But it is, one wonders if they were simply given that choice to go with the Redeemer and fight, or if it was forced upon them. But either way, they're all criminals except one who is pious and holy. Super interesting contrast. So here we read, Claustrophobia 1643 is an adventure game that allows two players to battle in the underground tunnels below New Jerusalem, the Christian bastion built at the heart of the underworld. One of the players plays the role of a group of resolute Westerners, while the other leads an almost infinite army of demonic creatures. So I'll add that even with the flavor text here, they kind of distinguish troglodyte from demon. So the demon are kind of these main big guys that can come out, whereas troglodytes are just the mini minions that are lots of them, sometimes compared to zerglings. They're still, to me, as far as I can tell, demons, but they're distinguished from demons in this game as demons being the big guys or more important guys. But I guess they're counted among the demon warriors, as we can see here. It's also interesting to note that this new version contains all of the materials from the original base game as well as the first expansion. And the first expansion had the amazing women warriors who just had these awesome abilities and were incredibly powerful. It also had the Hellhounds, which were like in between troglodyte and big demon as far as how powerful they are, and had their own interesting way of behaving. But the fluff there still mentioned Kardakaya, the big dinosaur-looking dude who's very powerful, who's from the second expansion, not included in this. So I wonder if later on they will find a way to bring back the Kardakaya. Game components. Miniatures 35. There's 35 of them. These miniatures represent the warriors from two factions. The human faction, controlled by the human player, and comprised of human warriors. In this box, the human faction is the Western warrior force. Then the Infernal faction, controlled by the Infernal player, and composed of Infernal warriors. In this box, the Infernal faction is the demon warrior force. So it's interesting that it says in this box humans are Western warriors, and in this box Infernal are demons, implying that perhaps with an expansion, there's a different type of Infernal player that's not demon or something. I don't know. We created this identifier as we plan on releasing additional forces and future products. I just answered my own question. I better read on first before I speculate. The warriors from the same faction are allied warriors, and the warriors from the different factions are enemy warriors. Warrior boards, character, parchment, and tablet. Each warrior has boards that allow them to control their warriors. A warrior board is composed of two parts, a character parchment and the tablet. When a player has to use a miniature, they slide the corresponding parchment into a tablet. So I guess tablet is like the frame, like the dashboard, and then the parchment is the particular character sheet that slides in, as you can see. Western warrior board, 5 of them. One, name. Western warriors are nameless, as befits valueless scum. They are sacrificable convicts, often sent on dead-end, futile missions. 2. Force and type. The shape of the icon indicates the warrior's force. Here it is a Western warrior. The illustration of the icon itself indicates the type of warrior, leader or fighter. 3. Artwork. 4. Lines of activation. So these are that entire horizontal row of each one is a line of activation. 4.1. Space for the activation die. Each line of activation corresponds to a value of the die. 4.2. Space for damage marker. When the warrior suffers a hit, they receive a damage marker. The human player chooses which line of activation to place it on. 4.3. Statistics. These give the number of movement points they have available. Movement. There's a movement symbol. Looks a little bit like a compass. The number of combat dice that the warrior rolls during an attack. Combat symbol. Looks like a hammer. Warhammer. And its defense value. Looks like a shield. Defense. 4.4. Space for a gift token, or to draw an instinct card. This space can hold a gift token, or an instinct card icon. And 6. Talents. Some warriors have talents. These are represented by icons. It is interesting that they went for the iconography in a lot of things here. But yeah, on 5 I do see that for the Redeemer we have the talent. The damage markers are interesting. Before they were just kind of red plastic pins that would go in, but now I think that they are more like cardboard overlays. When they go over, it reminds you of what the default stats are for an injured or incapacitated warrior. I think it defaults to 0 combat, they roll 0 dice, and 0 movement, they don't move, and then 3 defense, meaning it still takes a die roll of 3 or higher value to be a hit, even for an incapacitated warrior. Next page, demons times 13, and hellhound board times 2. So, the 13 demon boards different from the 2 hellhound boards. 1. Name. Each demon is unique and has a name that was given to it by the Westerners on their first meeting. Hellhounds are numerous in the underworld, in the same way as troglodytes, and therefore they do not have their own names. 2. Force and type. The shape of the icon indicates the warrior force. Here it is a demon warrior. The illustration of the icon itself indicates the type of warrior, demon or hellhound. So, it's obvious if you're infernal or Westerner or human. But then beyond that, you have force. In this case, it's demon. But then beyond that, type of warrior, demon or hellhound. I wonder how often that will come up for relevant rules in combat. I'm sure someone. 3. Artwork. 4. Statistics. The demons and the hellhounds have the same statistics as the Western warriors. Movement, combat, and defense. They also have a number of life points, which are hearts, that determine the number of hits they can suffer before being killed. Ability. Yeah, well, I'd note on that's interesting because they're simply taking that much total damage, but it doesn't reduce what they can do or how you can activate them because the game is so asymmetrical. With the human, as they're taking more damage, they're crossing out lines of activity that you can choose to do with them, lowering their choices, where the demon just has an HP value, but it doesn't reduce the stuff they can do typically. 5. Ability. Each demon has an ability whose effects and the conditions of use are described on the board. The hellhounds do not have any abilities. 6. Talent. Some demons have 1 or more talents that are represented by icons. And we can see that certainly the demon board has a talent, but also hellhounds can potentially have talents, even if they don't have abilities. They could still have talents. 7. Power. Some demons and hellhounds have a power that requires the use of the dice of destiny to trigger them. 7.1. Wait, page 8. Excuse me, did I skip a page? No, sorry, I'm crazy. We're fine. Good. Power. Some demons and hellhounds have a power that requires the use of a dice of destiny to trigger them. 7.1. Phase. This icon indicates during which phase of the game this power becomes active. 7.2. Names of the power. 7.3. Target. These icons indicate the warriors who are affected by this power. 7.4. Trigger conditions. This indicates the value or combination of dice of destiny necessary to trigger the power. Up next is space for the dice of destiny. In case it wasn't obvious or implied, dice of destiny are the dice that the infernal player, the bad guy, rolls, that he can do different actions with. Also, just for simplicity, I'll just continue using the pronoun he, because I happen to be he. But everything could just as easily be she, or they, or whatever. But the space for the dice of destiny that he can roll. 7.8. Preparation spaces. The dice are allocated here until the trigger conditions are of the corresponding power are fulfilled. 7.6. Trigger spaces. When the trigger conditions of the power are fulfilled, the infernal player slides the dice from the preparation space to the trigger space, and the effect is triggered. 7.7. Effect. The triggered effect is described for each demon and hellhound in this box. It also indicates the duration that the effect remains active. If nothing is indicated, the effect is immediate. Then we have special troglodyte board. There's only one of them. In the example, we can see tough troglodyte up there. So clearly, some troglodytes get their own board, their own tablet. 1. Name. 2. Force and type. The shape of the icon indicates the warrior's force. Here it is a demon warrior. The illustration of the icon itself indicates the type of warrior. This symbol means tough troglodyte. 3. Artwork. 4. Statistics. Movement, combat, and defense, and the number of life points. All three of the basic stats plus the health stat that the infernal player uses for its monsters. And finally, 5. Talent. Some troglodytes have one or more talents that are represented by icons. Alright, very cool. One thing to note that many others have noted is that the game itself doesn't look to be much larger in terms of space it's taking up on the board. The game has always been a table hawk with large tiles, except for the monster and hero dashboards. They are larger than before. Hopefully everything still fits on whatever table you use, or tables. I expect it must, otherwise we will play on the floor like the dogs of war we are. Alright, that's too much. Board of Destiny times 1. The Board of Destiny is the control panel of the infernal player. It allows them to manage their threat points and dice of destiny, but also to trigger their powers by assigning these dice. 1. Troglodyte Zone. 1.1. Name. 1.2. Force and type. The shape of the icon indicates the warrior force. Here it is a demon warrior. The illustration of the icon itself indicates the type of warrior, hence troglodyte. So we simply have an area called the Troglodyte Zone. I wonder if this could ever be removed and there could be an infernal player who doesn't have troglodyte as their basic. Spend too much time on conjecture for possible upcoming expansions. Part of me does expect, though, that there will be expansions to this as well. And the larger part of me hopes that they'll all fit in the original, in this base box, this new base box, because that's nice. Force and type, that's troglodytes. 1.3, statistics. This is telling us the troglodytes have the same statistics as the Western warriors: movement, combat, and defense. They also have a number of life points that determine the number of hits they can suffer before being killed. Standard. Number 2, powers. 2.1, phase. This icon indicates during which phase of the game this power becomes active. 2.2, name of the power. 2.3, target. These icons indicate the warriors who are affected by this power. 2.4, trigger conditions. This indicates the value or combination of dice of destiny necessary to trigger the power. So what we just saw with those bits of information there for the troglodytes on the left is quite similar to what any of the demon dashboard or tablets or parchments will have. What's new is this next part, the spaces for the dice of destiny. This is where you're allocating the resources as the demon player, the infernal player, what you basically want to have as your special powers for that turn. Space for the dice of destiny, 2.5, preparation spaces. The dice are allocated here until the trigger conditions of the corresponding power are fulfilled. Trigger spaces. When the trigger conditions of the power are fulfilled, the infernal player slides the dice from the preparation space to the trigger space, and the effect is triggered. So having a separate preparation and trigger spaces for dice is quite different from the first game, and makes me wonder if we're going to read about being able to kind of save up dice from one round to another until you complete the trigger. Whereas in the first game, you basically couldn't save dice from one round to another except for one space, like you save a generic rollable dice, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. But here we have preparation spaces, trigger spaces, and then 2.7, effect. The triggered effect is represented by an icon. See the description on the Board of Destiny's effect, page 11. So over on that next page on the right there, you can see all of the effects for what kinds of powers you can trigger. And that's basically what it's all about. It's just, what do I want to have come out this turn? Or do have special abilities this turn? 3, threat point storage zone. Threat point storage zone. This is where the infernal player keeps the threat points they have gained. So threat points are not the same as these effects or powers. They're just the general money, coin, dollar, energy, evil power, economic accumulation, what you use to summon your monsters. 4, available dice pool. This reserve can hold the 6 dice of destiny that are available to the infernal player to trigger their powers and those of the demons and the hellhounds. 5, alarm tile dice space. Up to 3 bonus dice of destiny obtained through the effect of an alarm tile can be placed on the space. It is only used as a reminder. So I think we have a larger dice pool than the first game, but it may require more. And also, this alarm tile space is a new feature. But in general, over on the right here, I won't get into all of the details how, but the types of effects are certainly streamlined, is a nice way of saying it, or simplified is a more neutral way of saying it. I'm cautiously optimistic that making it so that the Board of Destiny has fewer options will lead to better gameplay. Even if it's comparable or slightly worse somehow, the game will still be excellent. I haven't played it yet, but I feel that confident in this game because it is just based on excellent stuff. On this next page here, we can see the Prima Materia gems. It's a cool component, crystally red component. The Prima Materia. And if I screw up any pronunciations, please let me know in the comments and, call me a jerkface. That's okay. But I think it's Prima Materia. And it's a rare stone, but is abundant in the underworld. It has great powers and is much sought after by humans. These gems are the currency of the infernal player that allows them to bring into play their warriors. The small gems are worth 1 threat point, and the big ones are worth 3 threat points. I think it's awesome that they took the more abstract idea of threat points, generic bad guy cash or fuel and turned it into a more concrete thing that fits into the fluff, prima materia. That's awesome. One of many awesome little things that they kind of figured out to do with this game. Activation dice times 8. The activation dice are only used by the human player to activate their warriors. Now, distinct from that, up next we have the Dice of Destiny. So it's very cool that instead of just basic 6-sided dice, we now have unique dice that they're still 6-sided, but they're unique for each side and for combat or not. Dice of Destiny times 6. The Dice of Destiny are only used by the Infernal player to activate their powers and those of their demons and hellhounds. Combat dice times 10. The combat dice are used by both players. Combat dice are relied. They're rolled to determine the number of successful hits that occur during combat. The skull icon indicates a value of 6. So there's still 1 through 6, but skull means, I don't know, it doesn't mean anything, but I think it's cool when they make the 6 like something special. I don't know. Because it's all, in this case, it is special because 6 always lands a hit no matter what special someone has. A lot of games have that, and I think it's a good rule. Nothing should be completely invulnerable. Damage markers times 40. The damage markers are used by both players to record hits suffered by their warriors. Anyway. I won't stop too much more. I think I've done enough of that, but it is interesting what will be different or not different, because it says it's used by both players, but then in the next column over, we see exhausted state tokens. But I thought those were used for Western warriors instead of exhausted state tokens. But, come on, let's read on here. Gift tokens. Some warriors can receive gifts according to the scenario. The corresponding tokens are placed on the recipient warrior's board. Alright, so that's awesome. Because then instead of having to remember that you have a card that works with 5, so if you roll a 5 and place it on that warrior, you'll get the prescience. Now it's on the dashboard itself, so you just instantly know. And it's very obvious. No one has to peek at your cards that you have face up. Tiles. There's 48 of them. It's pretty awesome. It's a large number. The tiles represent the underground tunnels which the warriors explore. 1. Number. Each tile is numbered to help setting up the play area. 2. Occupation limit. This value indicates the maximum number of warriors of each faction that can be present at the same time on that tile. And I should note that unless we read something later that changes this, the number of warriors from one side doesn't influence the maximum number on the other side. So it's not like if a space says 3, it can have 3 demons and 3 humans at the same time. It doesn't mean 3 total. And it also doesn't mean that if a space said 5, that, one side could have 6 as long as the other player had less than 4. It's nothing like that. It's a max of 3 for each side in this case, if it's a occupation limit of 3. I made that more complex than it needs to be, but it's right there. Effect icon. Some tiles possess special rules that are indicated by an icon. 4. Opening. Where it connects where the entrances are. Turn marker times 1. The turn marker is used in some scenarios and is moved on a turn track that can be found on the reverse side of each tile. Nice. Now here we have 5 exhausted state tokens. The exhausted state tokens are placed on the Western Warrior's board as a reminder to the player when required. I guess you only use them on a single damaged row, and only on that row if you assign a die to that row. So literally only when it's exhausted for that round, but not as damage markers simultaneously. Equipment cards times 20. According to the scenario, the Western warriors have access to equipment such as weapons or armor that are represented by these cards. The effects and conditions of these are indicated on each card. In the base game we had objects. Now we call them equipment. Sounds good either way. equipment is event cards times 24. The Infernal player can draw these cards after the triggering of one of the Board of Destiny's powers. The effects and conditions of use are indicated on each card. Instinct cards. Depending upon the effect of the choice of the line of activation of these warriors, the human player may draw instinct cards. These cards have two uses, and the player must choose one of them at the moment they are played. On the one hand, they allow the results of an activation die to be modified, and on the other, they have a single effect. This is really new, and this is very, very cool, because before you had advantage cards, which are like one-off special, gotcha moments you could play, but now they have multiple uses, potentially, and they're called instinct cards, and it's a more strategy to decide, do I want to change a die result or use the special effect? That's very awesome. And things that used to be cards, like gifts, are now tokens. We have gift tokens over there. And I think they'll probably, perhaps the women warriors' skills are also just represented as gift tokens, because the gifts and skills have some similarities. Various tokens, 86 of them. The Claustrophobia 1643 box is full of various tokens whose uses depend on effect tiles, on effects, tiles, cards, etc., or on the scenario being played. They're listed here. We have 3 teleportation / seal of protection tokens. We have 1 direction token. We have 10 triggered effect tokens. 1 prescience token. 1 blessed token. We have 1 locked door token. We have 18 talent tokens. We have 2 speed tokens, 5 anger tokens, 5 pursuit tokens. I'm reading all out of order here. 2 courage tokens, 6 escape tokens, 1 exalted token, 6 loss of talent tokens, 1 rock slide token, 5 held chest tokens. There goes my rat outside. 4 held miraculous water tokens, and 1 held explosive token. So those circular ones look like they would go around an actual miniature, which I think is cool, that it kind of shows the person holds it. In general, though, this is one area where I think the unique art on each of the tokens in the original game is cooler than this more standardized version, but I don't mind it terribly. Alright, page 14. Preparing for play. Select a faction. 1 player selects the human faction. 1 player selects the infernal faction. Both players select a scenario from the scenario booklet to play. We chose the scenario, the survivors, to guide you through the sequence of play. It's also the first scenario in the first game. Scenarios describe the tile layout required to set up the play area, the specific forces each player has access to, victory conditions, specific location effects, etc. Each player prepares their faction following the steps below. So, we have the human player. 1. Gather your men. And women, too, even in this game. Come on. Although I did just a moment ago say, I'll only use he pronouns. So, hypocrite. Gather your men, select the specified miniatures and the corresponding assembled boards, and place them in front of you. Okay, we're assembling all there, putting their parchment into the tablets. 2. Sanctify the Redeemer. Select the gift tokens, Aura of Courage, and Prescience, and place them in the slots of the Redeemer Warrior as indicated. Again, we're just using scenario 1 as the example, so other scenarios might sanctify in different ways. 3. Equip your men. Place the equipment card Blunderbuss by one of the condemned scouts, Warrior Born. 4. Final preparation. Gather the activation dice, shuffle the deck of instinct cards, and place them within reach. The Infernal player. 1. Gather your Infernals. Select the specified miniatures and place them in front of you. 2. Order your ranks. Select the board of destiny and place it in front of you. Select the assembled board of the demon, the hunter, the assembled board for each of the hellhounds, and place them as indicated in the figure. 3. Harness your resources. Select all 6 destiny dice and place them in the available dice pool on the destiny board as indicated. 4. Final preparation. Select all of the prima materia gems, shuffle the deck of event cards, and place them within reach. Just like many other pages, many other rule books, you basically can just kind of look at these images and know this is how my side sets up. Also, I should have said this at the beginning, I forgot, but I'm happy as long as it's somewhere in this video. This rulebook is not necessarily the final version. This is what is already available for download before the game has been shipped to houses. Therefore, wording, other changes, maybe graphics are changed. So this is, don't consider this canon for ending a huge fight in your living room for what the official final rules are if you're playing this in 2022 or whenever. And next page. Ooh, what's this? Oh, this gets my excitement going. Rules priority hierarchy. Now, usually a game will just say, golden rule, cards trump the rule book if there's a discrepancy or whatever. In this case, we have a whole hierarchy. Claustrophobia 1643 contains gameplay where numerous effects due to cards, power abilities, etc. can occur. As such, it is possible that 2 rules can seem to contradict each other. When this occurs, the following priority hierarchy should be applied. 1. Scenario. So, I think it means, highest. Number 1 is highest because it's on the top rather than at the beginning, and therefore less, in case you have that flip-flopped. 1. Scenario, most important. 2. Tiles. 3. Western Warrior board. 4. Demon, Hellhound, and Tough Troglodyte board. 5. Board of Destiny. 6. Gift token. 7. Equipment card. 8. Event card. 9. Instinct card. 10. Rulebook rule. So if someone plays an event card, somehow at the same time seems to contradict an instinct card, the event card wins and is the one that's applied. Sequence of play is next here. Each game is divided into a series of turns. These turns are divided into 5 phases. These phases play in the following order. So, first we have preparation phase of the human player. The human player determines the statistics of their warriors. They roll the dice and allocate their dice to their warriors. Next, activation phase of the human player. The human warriors move, explore the tunnels, and fight troglodytes, hellhounds, and demons. Next we have preparation phase of the infernal player. This is where the infernal player selects which of their powers are triggered. Up next we have threat phase of the infernal player. The infernal player brings demons, hellhounds, and troglodytes into play. Then finally, activation of the infernal player. The infernal player warriors move and fight the human warriors. So on either side, activation is actually where you're going around doing stuff, exploring and fighting for either side to the extent that you can. But before, they used to each have 2, and they would just say that threat phase or spending threat to summon monsters was at the end of the demon's preparation time. But it makes sense to make it a separate phase because technically you are supposed to be spending your threat to summon demons after you've done your Dice of Destiny rolling and allocating. So it makes sense to have 3 phases. But only the last phase of each is usually extended, I would say. But that could vary. Preparation phase of the human player. Here we're going into detail for each phase. The human player determines the statistics of their Western warriors for the current turn using these steps. 1. Discards all instinct cards played during the last turn. Place these cards in the Instinct deck discard pile, next to the Instinct card deck. Remove all previously allocated activation dice. Remove the exhausted state tokens and any other invalid tokens. 2. Roll as many activation dice as there are active warriors. 3. Select an activation die for each of the warriors and place it on the warrior's board in the space indicated, according to the result of that die. So again, super obvious if you already know this game if you played it before, but like if you rolled a 4, 5, and 3, you have to put that, and you had 3 warriors. You got to put the 4 on somebody, the 5 on somebody, and 3 on somebody. And whoever you put the 4 on, it's on that fourth one, that fourth one down. So, just as it shows here. So choose to add a single instinct card to each of their active warriors. That's interesting. Choose which of the 2 effects enters play. The instinct card is placed next to the selected warrior's board, with the chosen effect visible for the human player. I'm not sure I quite understood what I said there. But it says, as I think part of Phase 3, as part of Phase 3, for the preparation, as part of Step 3 for the preparation phase of the human player, choose to add a single instinct card to each of their active warriors. Choose which of the 2 effects enter play. The instinct card is placed next to the selected warrior's board with the chosen effect visible for the human player. Alright, that sounds fine. The rolled value on the activation die is then changed to that shown on the instinct card. That activation die is placed in the appropriate slot on the line of activation. Or, alternatively, that's what or means, the effects as described on the card are applied. So I guess it's during this phase that you actually would be playing like the instinct cards from as I understand it, rather than like in the midst of combat, like you would in the first game. 4. Finally, apply any further effects created by the activation dice's final value to each of the warriors. Some warriors can draw additional instinct cards and/or activate gifts based upon that final value. The final placement of the activation die determines the line of activation. The warrior statistics, available gifts, and available instinct cards as defined by this line, this turn. So if you change from a 2 to a 4, only the 4 is going to count for giving final effects for whatever that would benefit from being on 4. Exhausted state. If a Western warrior's final activation die value assigns it in a line of activation that has been cancelled by a damage marker, that warrior becomes exhausted for that turn. An exhausted state token is placed on that warrior. It's placed on their warrior board, and they are considered to be exhausted. Instinct. If an activation die is assigned to a line of activation that is not exhausted and contains an instinct icon, an instinct card can be drawn from the instinct card deck into the human player's available instinct card hand. The number of instinct cards that the human player may have in their hand at any time is limited to the amount of warriors that the human player starts the game with. If that number is exceeded at any time, the human player must immediately discard down to match that number. The discarded cards are placed in the instinct card discard pile, and none of their effects can be used. The remaining hand of instinct cards can be used during the next preparation phase of the human player. So it is during the preparation phase that instinct cards are used. Gifts. If an activation die is assigned to a line of activation that is not exhausted and contains a gift icon, that gift's effect is applied. Gift effects are described in more detail on page 24. Healing. The effects of certain cards can heal a previously cancelled line of activation. In this case, the corresponding damage marker should be removed by the human player. If the line that has just been healed is the line designated by the warrior's activation die in the preparation phase, then they are no longer considered to be exhausted and can act normally. Activation phase of the human player. Each warrior can now perform any action. Each warrior is activated, one warrior at a time. Each warrior must complete their activation before the next warrior starts theirs. During their activation, a warrior can move first, then perform an attack. Or perform an action, then move. I'm sorry, I said attack, but I meant to say action. They can move first, then perform an action. Or perform an action, then move. Both movement and perform an action are optional. A warrior can begin to move. They're optional. So, you don't have to move if you don't want to, for example. A warrior cannot begin to move, perform an action, and then finish their movement. You can't split movement. The different possible actions are enter combat. Before I even say that, one comment I'll have, and I think it's implied, is that you don't have to move the full amount. So if your movement's 3, it seems fine that you move 2. It says it's optional to do a movement, but some people might strictly interpret that as you either do it completely or you don't. But I'm going to say that it's obvious you can move up to your movement amount. So the different possible actions are enter combat, perform an action described in the scenario, denoted by the keyword action, use any of the equipment, denoted by the keyword action. So the rules for movement and combat are described in detail on page 20 and 21 respectively. So that's pretty cool. So actions just attack or do any other miscellaneous thing that you might want to do that counts as an action. Exhausted warrior. With an exhausted state token. Any warrior that has an exhausted state token on their board has the following statistics until the next preparation phase. 0 movement. They can't move. 0 attack. They don't roll any attack dice. And 3 defense. Each combat dice attacking them with a 3 or higher hits them. In addition, they can no longer use any talents and do not draw an instinct card. They do not benefit from any of the advantages linked to their equipment cards, unless otherwise indicated on the card. However, they can benefit from any eventual bonuses to their statistics. Alright, so that's what happens if you get exhausted. One thing I'm not sure about is if you get wounded and take a damage. No, because that would happen after, so forget that. It all makes sense. Preparation phase of the Infernal player. The Infernal player selects which powers of their Board of Destiny, which powers of their Hellhounds and their Demons are active this turn by allocating the appropriate amount of Dice of Destiny on the boards. These allocated Dice of Destiny are placed into the appropriate preparation spaces until the conditions required to trigger the power have been fulfilled. They are then moved to the trigger spaces, and the power comes into effect. In order to do this, the Infernal player carries out the following steps. 1. Discard all event cards played during the last turn. Place these cards in the event deck discard pile, next to the event card deck. Collect all of the Dice of Destiny located in the trigger spaces. This forms the available dice pool. Dice of Destiny located in the preparation spaces may also be added to the available dice pool. 2. Roll 3 Dice of Destiny from their available dice pool. The rolling of 3 dice is mandatory. Therefore, Dice of Destiny from the preparation spaces must be used if not enough Dice of Destiny from the available dice pool are available. 3. Allocate all of the rolled dice in whatever manner they like between the different preparation spaces. These spaces can be empty or already have dice on them during this distribution. 4. Check whether the active powers trigger conditions have been fulfilled. If fulfilled, move the dice of destiny in the prepared spaces into the trigger spaces. So clearly, it seems to me, by the way, if there's anything in my commentary where I seem to interpret something wrong, please comment and let me know so I can make note of it and that everyone can know. But it sure sounds like, unlike the first edition, in this one, you can start to build up dice into a certain power until it has enough of that, what it needs to trigger, as long as, you roll the mandatory 3. Speaking more about triggered conditions for powers, if not fulfilled, the allocated dice of destiny remain in the preparation spaces. Fulfillment may occur during the next preparation phase with the allocation of further dice. We can see that here on figure 7. We see something there. Event card hand size restrictions. The number of event cards that the Infernal player may have in their hand at any time is limited to 4. If that number is exceeded at any time, the Infernal player must immediately discard down to 4. The discarded cards are placed in the event card discard pile, and none of their effects can be used. These cards can be used at the time indicated in their description, and must then be discarded. Threat phase of the Infernal player. Once the dice of destiny have been allocated and the power is triggered, the Infernal player can bring their demon warriors into play. In order to do this, they can spend as many threat points as they choose from their threat point storage zone, taking into account the cost of each warrior and their associated restrictions. In most scenarios, the Infernal player has a demon warrior reserve pool consisting of 11 troglodytes, 2 hellhounds, and at least 1 demon, from which they take the miniatures to bring into play. Troglodytes, 1 threat point. Each troglodyte costs 1 threat point to bring into play. Troglodytes have the following statistics: 1 movement. They move once per turn by default. 1 attack. 3 defense value, takes a die roll of 3 or more to hit them, and 1 health. 1 hit hits them and kills them. Hellhound. A Hellhound costs 3 threat points to bring into play. The Infernal player has a maximum of 2 Hellhounds in any given game. The Hellhounds have the following statistics: 0 movement, 0 combat, 4 defense, and 3 health. When a Hellhound is brought into play, the Infernal player can use one of the dice from their available dice pool to immediately trigger their power. The value of this dice of destiny is chosen by the Infernal player and triggers that Hellhound's power. And those powers, I'm sure, change the stats. That's why we can see the base is no combat. I think it's called their, instinctual or wild or primal side. But then they kind of wake up in a sense and start moving and fighting when you assign dice to them, giving them energy, as it were. Demon. The Infernal player can only bring into play the demons specified by the scenario currently being played. The statistics, talents, abilities, and powers of these demons are described on their boards. Important. The Infernal player can trigger the power of the demon during its preparation phase, even if its miniature is not yet in play. That is very important, and to some, I'm sure, counterintuitive. I guess, in a sense, the demon is behind the scenes, in the catacombs, manipulating things. The Infernal player chooses the tile or tiles on which their warriors are brought into play, taking into consideration any tile occupation limits. See movement. Tile occupation rules below, and the following 2 restrictions. Tile with an opening. The tile must have at least 1 unexplored opening. An opening is considered unexplored when it does not lead to another tile, So you have to come in from an opening, an edge, when you're summoning your demon player stuff. Empty tile. The tile must not contain any enemy warriors. So by default, you can't summon demons where there's already good guys, human people at least. Warriors that are brought into play during the threat phase can act normally during the following activation phase. So no summoning sickness. Activation phase of the Infernal player. Each Infernal warrior on a tile can be activated. Each warrior is activated one warrior at a time. Each warrior must have finished their activation before the next warrior can be activated. During their activation, a warrior can move first, then perform an action, or perform an action, then move. Both movement and perform an action are optional. A warrior cannot begin to move, perform an action, and then finish their movement. Same with the humans. The different possible actions are enter combat, perform an action described in the scenario, denoted by the keyword action. On to movement details. Movement is always optional. A warrior moves by leaving a tile by an opening. They can move as many times as they wish within the limits of their value. Yep, so up to the value is implied there. Leaving a tile costs 1 movement. Some tiles have an effect that has unfortunate consequences for the warriors. The trigger conditions of each tile's effects are described on page 25 and 26. Adjacent tiles. Tiles are considered adjacent if they are on an edge that they are in edge-to-edge contact, and an opening connects them directly. So if you can walk between them, use your eyes, you can see. So clearly diagonals won't be, because how could you walk through solid wall without some card that says you can? Unless it's like a diagonal tunnel, but it doesn't seem that it ever works that way. Tile occupation rule. To move onto a tile, the player controlling the warrior who moves must check that the destination tile can accommodate them. A tile cannot accommodate more warriors of each faction than is given by the tile occupation limit. The tile occupation limit is indicated on each tile. So we see there on that one there's 3, which means that warrior can't move onto there because there's already 3 for that side. Part of what is great about claustrophobia is that even in the rules, there's a sense of everything being tight and elbowed together, a knife fight in a phone booth. You literally can't squeeze more people into this portion of the tunnel. And related to that tile occupation rule, there's the blocking rule up next here. Blocking rule is a warrior can only leave a tile containing enemy units if there are at least as many warriors from their faction as there are enemies. Over on figure 9 here it says, after the condemned scout moves, the Redeemer cannot leave the tile anymore because of inferior numbers. Right, so if you have 2 human warriors and there's 3 demons on the same tile, you can't leave because you don't have at least as many as them. Exploration. The Infernal warriors cannot explore an unexplored opening. They can't expand out the map. Only humans do that. During their movement, each human warrior can leave a tile to explore an unexplored opening to reveal a new tile. This is called exploration. An opening is unexplored if it does not lead immediately to another tile. The player carries out the following steps. They place their warrior on the opening they wish to explore. The Infernal player takes the first tile from the pile and places it in contact with the opening to be explored, any way they like, as long as the new tile is accessible to the warriors exploring it. So basically, when a human wants to explore, they say, I'm going through this hallway, this hole, whatever you want to call it. And the demon player draws from the stack of tiles and picks the from the top of it and picks the orientation it'll go, as long as it lets them walk through it. The warrior, any effects the tile generates are triggered. Descriptions of the tiles are on page 25 and 26. The human warrior may continue to move or explore additional tiles. if they still have any remaining movement points. Dead ends. If after exploring an opening, the play area is left with no more unexplored openings, the last tile to have been placed is discarded by the Infernal player, and a new tile is drawn, and so on, until a tile with an unexplored opening appears. So the map itself can't ever become completely enclosed. There must always be expandable as long as there are tiles available. Combat. A warrior can attack an enemy warrior who is on the same tile as themselves. When a warrior attacks, the player who controls them carries out the following steps. 1. They must choose which of the enemies on the same tile they are going to target. A target can be a human warrior, a demon, a hellhound, a special troglodyte, or all of the troglodytes present on the same tile. 2. The player rolls a number of combat dice equal to the warrior's combat points. Each die with a value higher than or equal to the selected target's defense value, shield, is counted as a hit. A wound marker results, damage marker, on a combat die is always counted as a hit. I mean, 6 is always our hits, is what it's saying. 3. The player that controls the warrior or warriors that have been hit must then allocate the hits. So, defender chooses where to place those hits. Allocation of hits on the troglodytes. A single hit is enough to kill a troglodyte, as they have 1 health. The miniature is then removed from the play area and returned to the demon warrior reserve pool. If several hits are successful, any additional hit is transferred to the next remaining troglodyte on the same tile. Each successful hit kills 1 troglodyte. So normally you can only attack 1 monster at a time. But with troglodytes, if you're aiming for them, you aim for all troglodytes, and then each hit you do kills 1 of the troglodytes. Kind of a sweep kill, one imagines. I think it shows an example here. The Redeemer has a combat of 3 this turn. He is hunting troglodyte. He rolls 3 combat dice, a 2 and 3. A 2, a 3, and a 6. Therefore, the 3 and the 6 gives him 2 successful hits, and he kills 2 troglodytes, as troglodytes have a defense value of 3. Allocation of hits on a hellhound. The Infernal player places a damage marker for each successful hit on the corresponding hellhound board. As soon as that damage marker, damage equals or is greater than its health, the hellhound is killed, and the miniature is not returned to the demon warrior reserve pool, but instead is permanently removed from the game, hence only being able to have a maximum of 2 hellhounds per scenario. Allocation of hits on a demon. The Infernal player places a damage marker for each successful hit on the corresponding demon's board. As soon as that damage equals or becomes greater than its health, the demon player is killed. Demon player, God, that'd be horrible. God, Joe is dead because of this game. And the miniature is removed from the game and placed back into the demon warrior reserve pool. The second time the demon is killed, the miniature is not placed into the demon warrior reserve pool, but it's permanently removed from the game. So it could die twice. You could bring it back a second time, but then, 3 times a charm, it won't come back for the. It won't be resurrected a second time for a 3rd life. Allocation of hits on a Western warrior. Each successful hit requires the human player to select a line of activation. They then place a damage marker in the corresponding space, and that line is then considered cancelled. Once all 6 lines of activation of a Western warrior have been cancelled, they're killed and their miniatures immediately removed from the game. Example, the demon attacks their enemy. They had an attack of 4, so the Infernal player rolls 4 combat dice. They had 1, 2, 4, and 5, which scores 2 successful hits on the Redeemer, because his defense is 4, so 4 and 5 hit. The human player chooses to place the damage markers on lines 4 and 6 of the Redeemer's lines of activation. Important. If the selected cancelled line of activation corresponds to the activation die, that warrior is not considered exhausted. A Western warrior becomes exhausted only when they receive an activation die that matches a previously cancelled line during the preparation phase. So their stats won't suddenly change if they get hit and they take damage to the currently assigned activation phase. It's only if during the human's preparation phase the human decides or is forced to assign a die to their already damaged line of action. Equipment. Some human warriors can benefit from equipment that increases their statistics or gives them special abilities. The conditions for obtaining these equipment cards are described in each scenario. Warriors cannot exchange this equipment, drop it, pick it up, or destroy it. Equipment is removed from the game when the owner is either killed or leaves the game, so a dead warrior won't drop their hammer or whatever. Talents. Some warriors have talents which give them extra abilities during the game. A Western warrior cannot use any talents while they're considered to be exhausted. A warrior cannot combine the effects of a single talent. The use of each talent is described below. Now I'm confused. Are they just using two different phrases? Or is talents and gifts different? Here we have blessed is a talent. I'm going back up here for a second. Where does I see gifts? So in the gift tokens here, prescience and aura of courage are gifts. I'm going back down to where we were. Yeah, they're not here under talents. So talents and gifts are decidedly different things. Talents are just kind of built into the character, and I think gifts, you might get different ones in different scenarios. So talents, the first one is blessed. The blessed talent makes it so the warrior with this talent can, during the preparation phase, after the activation dice have been assigned, bless another warrior of their choice. A warrior cannot be blessed at the same time, and at the same time receive an instinct card. Faith and animal instinct do not mix well. The blessed warrior gains either a bonus of +1 movement or +2 attack until the end of the following activation phase. Furthermore, if the line of activation that the warrior was using is cancelled, it is immediately healed. Place the blessing token, showing the appropriate side, on the blessed warrior's board. The talent can only be used once per scenario. Discard the blessing token at the end of the activation phase of the warrior. So it either gives them an extra movement or an extra weapon, and it can heal the line of activation that they were using if it was injured, used once per scenario. Bodyguard. Next talent. During an attack, warriors with this talent can choose to suffer a number of hits allocated to an allied warrior in combat on the same tile. So the brutes have this just like in the first game, and they can be meat shields in that regard. And of course, blessed is what the Redeemer has as a talent. Devoted. This is a new talent to me, I think. Devoted means a warrior with this talent can use certain gifts, scenario dictated, associated to certain lines of activation of their board. If the die chosen for the warrior corresponds to the line of activation of one of their gifts, it can be used. So I think devoted just means that they can receive gifts. Before, it just said the Redeemer was the one who can have gifts, but now I guess, they're keeping it broader, they're keeping it more open-ended, so perhaps other character types will be able to have devoted, meaning that they can get gifts as well. Elusive. Elusive is one that the Blades for Hire, which now I think are called Scouts, are, the kind of roguish, fast folks. A warrior with this talent can move without taking into account the number of enemy warriors. They are therefore not affected by the blocking rule. If a warrior with elusive is on the same tile as one or more enemies with impressive, the two talents cancel each other, and the normal blocking rule applies. So normal blocking rule, of course, if there's 3 enemies and your side has 2, you can't make any of your people leave until until the enemies are equal or less than in number. But if they're elusive, they could leave anyway, because it doesn't account for the enemy warriors. It still doesn't do anything about the total size limit, meaning 3 warriors of each side in a tile. But the idea is elusive, they can get past the enemies, so enemies won't block them from leaving. Elusive compared to the regular blocking rule, and that factored in with total number of people from or miniatures from each side, is all a big part of the strategy and tactics of this game, and therefore the game's namesake of Claustrophobia. Frenzied. This next talent, Frenzied. A warrior with this talent can re-roll each combat die once it did not produce a hit the first time during step 2 of a combat. So if you're Frenzied, you're really powerful, because if you roll 3 dice and only 1 hits, you can re-roll the 2 that missed, and then you have to keep the final results. Impressive. A warrior with this talent can prevent 1 or more enemies from leaving the tile they are currently on. If a warrior with elusive is on the same tile as 1 or more enemies with impressive, the 2 talents cancel each other out, and the normal blocking rules apply. So again, you can't leave, let's say your enemy has 3 warriors, and you have 2 warriors. Again, you can't leave unless you have elusive. Well, on the flip side of that, let's say one of your people has impressive. Well, even though your enemy has more units than you, they can't leave because one of your units is impressive. It's blocking them anyway, even though you have fewer numbers. And of course, if one of their units is elusive and one of your 2 is impressive, the normal blocking rules apply, and therefore their side, one of them can leave. It makes it sound more complicated than it is, but just think of, blocking rule, equal or less, you can leave. Elusive on one side of that, impressive on another side, with their effects, and the 2 would cancel each other out. Next, ranged combat. A warrior with this talent can attack an enemy warrior on the same tile or an adjacent tile. Now, of course, this is huge because so much of everything else is you have to be on the same tile. Just having to not be in the room with them is gigantic. Resistant. This is another huge and amazing talent that wasn't, I don't recall from before. A warrior with this talent ignores the first hit they suffer in each activation phase. That's awesome. I wonder if the brutes have that now. I hope they do, actually, because even though the brutes were tough, they would still die just as fast, Maybe if they have resistant now, it'll make it a little easier for the human side. Up next we have gifts. Okay, so just as talents are icons that are listed on each character parchment, gifts are these little chits, that's C-H-I-T, that give that ability that you can use if you assign a die for that value for that character. The devoted talent allows the warrior who has it to use gifts. Which gifts are available to the owner of the talent are scenario dictated. For each of the indicated gifts, the player places the corresponding token on the warrior's board during setup. Each gift is associated with a die value. Oh jeez, my screen just turned off here. So each gift is associated with a die value. The gift is activated if the warrior receives an activation die of the same value and they're not exhausted. So at this point in the reading, the talents are kind of essential to know all of them right from the beginning. But for gifts and tiles and anything else, this is where we get more into index territory. If you want to stop listening here or watching or whatever you're doing, I will not be super offended despite my sensitive soul, but if you want to get into the nitty-gritty, continue on here with me. Basically, I think you got the gist of the gameplay rules. And thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it. But I'll continue here for super nerds like me who want to hear all of this. So punish evil. Number 1. After having rolled the dice during the combat, the warrior with this gift strikes a hit for all results higher or equal to 2, irrespective of the defense of their target. That's pretty awesome. This gift has no effect if the warrior uses a grenade or blunderbuss. So, as long as they're melee or close range, after having rolled their dice in combat, they also do an additional hit. No, it doesn't say also. So, basically, it just treats everyone that they're fighting as though they have an armor of 2, even if their defense is much better than 2. That's awesome. Penetrate their defenses right away. Number 2, Aura of Anger. The effect of this aura starts at the end of the preparation phase of a human player. All allied warriors gain +1 attack until the beginning of the preparation phase of the human player. Mark the warriors by using an anger token. So all allied warriors. It doesn't say they have to be next to you or anything. 3. Aura of Courage. The effect of this aura starts at the end of the preparation phase of the human player. Choose another allied warrior. They gain +1 movement, +1 attack, and +1 defense until the beginning of the next human player's preparation phase. Mark the chosen warrior's board using a Courage token. So Aura of Anger gives +1 combat to everybody on your side. Aura of Courage, just one person, but you kind of super bless them with 1 of each: movement, combat, and defense. 3. Assembly. During their next preparation phase, the human player rolls 2 additional activation dice. These additional dice are then placed on the recipient's board to indicate receipt of this gift. That's very good, gives you a lot more options. 4. Laying on of Hands. The effect of this gift starts at the end of the preparation phase of the human player. The warrior with this gift can immediately heal the line of activation of their choice of an allied warrior on the same tile as them. Remove the corresponding damage marker. So this is your healing one. This is really strong. That's good to have. 5. Prescience. At the end of the human player's preparation phase, they place the Prescience token on the pile of tiles. The effect of this gift starts during the first exploration, carried out during the following activation phase. The human player secretly chooses the tile that is to be placed from the next 3 of the pile. Furthermore, they choose the orientation of this tile. They must, however, make sure that the chosen tile is accessible to the warrior who is exploring. The other 2 tiles are replaced on top of the pile in the order the player chooses. The human player removes the token from the pile after the gift has been used. So can you only use it? Can you only use it once? Or no, it shows you used it for that turn. Gotcha. Makes sense. 6. Sacrificial Strike. At the end of the human player's preparation phase, the human with this gift can strike a hit on a warrior of their choice on the same tile. The human player then rolls a combat die. If the result is more than or equal to 4, the holder of the gift also suffers a hit. This gift can be used twice per human player's preparation phase. Interesting. Can be used twice per preparation phase. Very, very interesting. Up next, we have the specials for tiles. Just want to look ahead to see. Up next, it's just the end of the tiles. That'll be credits. But I think before, very silly of me, I skipped the actual, I just mentioned that they were here, and I showed them. But we're going into the index of powers, if you will. And this is more than index. This is central. So please forgive me. But here's the powers on the board of destiny. So jumping over to the Infernal player, here are the actual choices of spaces where you can place your destiny dice during the preparation phase for the Infernal player. Abysmal threat. Condition. The Infernal player must allocate 1, 2, or 3 dice of destiny of the same color to trigger this power. Effect. The Infernal player gains 3 threat points per die of destiny allocated on the trigger space of this power. So we got 1, 2, or 3 dice here of the same color. I think half the colors are red, half are white. And you get as many event cards as the number of dice, not their value. Supernatural speed. Condition. The Infernal player must allocate 2 dice with a white result to trigger this power. Effect. The troglodytes gain +1 movement until the beginning of the next Infernal player preparation phase. The Infernal player allocates a speed token on the troglodyte image on the board of destiny as a reminder. Frenzied creatures. Condition. The Infernal player must allocate 2 dice with a red result to trigger this power. Effect. The troglodytes gain the Frenzied talent until the beginning of the next Infernal player preparation phase. The Infernal player allocates the Frenzied token on the troglodyte zone on the board of destiny as a reminder. Dark Destiny. Condition. The Infernal player must allocate 1 die to trigger this power. Effect. The Infernal player draws the same number of event cards as the value of the die on the trigger space of this power. They choose one of them to add to their hand, then discard the others. So you can put 1 die on here if you want, and you get to draw that many event cards as the value on the die. However, you only get to keep one of them. Oh, and I made a huge mistake there. Abysmal threat. I made it sound like that's how you were drawing event cards. No. Abysmal threat is how you're getting threat points. You put 1, 2, or 3 there, you'll get 3 threat points per die you put there. Abysmal threat is how you get threat points, prima materia. Dark Destiny is how you're going to draw event cards. It sounds like you can get at most 1 per turn using this. Intrepid Charge is the next one. Condition. The Infernal player must allocate several dice with a total value of at least 7 to trigger this power. So you can put several dice down as long as they value 7 or more, and the effect is, during the threat phase, the Infernal player can bring their warriors into play, ignoring the empty tile restriction. Therefore, you can bring warriors into where there's already enemy warriors. Sneaky Charge. The Infernal player must allocate several dice with a total value of at least 8 to trigger this power. Effect. During the threat phase, the Infernal player can bring their warriors into play, ignoring any tile with an opening restriction. So, if you used Intrepid Charge and Sneaky Charge somehow, you could pretty much summon demons anywhere you wanted in the play area on the board. Now, again, these could be different in the final version of the game. Anything that I've read in these rules can be. So don't take it as gospel. But it should give you a nice guide. And it might turn out to all be correct, but we'll see. The last thing is to read what the room tiles each do, and that's the very end of it. Tiles. The tile occupation limit is given on each tile, as well as a number to facilitate game setup. Some tiles carry special rules that are indicated by an icon. These rules may produce limited use effects. When this is the case, a resolved effect token is placed on the icon after resolution to signify that the effect has already been applied and can no longer be used. Alarm. This effect is only triggered the first time a human warrior enters this tile. During the next threat phase, the Infernal player rolls 1 additional die of destiny. The Infernal player places a die of destiny on the alarm tile on the alarm tile dice space on the board of Destiny. After resolution of the effect, the player places a triggered effect token on the tile's icon. I think the triggered effect token is cool so that you can know that you already used it, but it just seems like since you only use it when someone first enters, and only humans can make new tiles appear, it seems like you could just kind of remember, like, oh, it's already been activated because it's down already. That's alright. Booby Trap Tunnel is the next one. This effect is only triggered the first time a human warrior enters this tile. The Infernal player rolls a die. If the result is 3 or more, the human warrior suffers a hit. After resolution of the effect, the player places a triggered effect token on the tile's icon. Carnivorous Tunnel is the next one. Each time a warrior on this tile is hit during a combat, the effect of that hit is doubled. The effects of that hit are doubled. When a troglodyte is hit on this tile, 2 troglodytes are killed instead of 1. So Carnivorous Tunnel equals double damage. Demonic Well. The Infernal player can always bring into play a demon or a hellhound on this tile. They do not need to take into account the restrictions concerning a tile with an opening or an empty tile, meaning enemies could be there. If they do so, the cost of the demon is reduced by 1 threat point. So if they do bring in demons and they put them on this well, they're cheaper also. So man, you really want to summon from there if you can help it. And humans really want to get away from demonic wells. Devouring Pit is the next one. For every warrior on this tile at the start of their preparation phase, the controlling player rolls a combat die. If the resulting die is equal or higher than 4, that warrior suffers a hit. So, and that seems to just be perpetually each time. So as long as you're hanging out there, you could get damaged as during the preparation phase. Flooded Tunnel. When a warrior enters this tile, they must immediately end their movement, even if their movement point resource is not fully used up. Leaving this tile will cost the warrior their full movement point resource. So as soon as you enter, you have to end your movement, and it takes all of your movement to leave. Truly flooded. Fog. Any warrior on this tile has a defense of 6. So I guess it's easier to not get hit when they can't see you because of all the fog. Healing Fountain. When this tile is placed in the game, 2 miraculous water tokens are placed on it. At the start of one of their preparation phases, before rolling the dice, the human player can discard one of these tokens to heal a line of activation of their choice from a warrior on this tile. The corresponding damage marker is removed from the warrior's board. This healing effect can be carried out twice, because there's 2 of them. Hole in the Ground. When this tile is played, the Infernal player must place a Hole in the Ground token on another tile already in play. The Troglodytes consider all the tiles with a Hole in the Ground token and all the Hole in the Ground tiles as adjacent. So Hole in the Ground really good for Troglodytes because they just, each one is adjacent to any other tile or token that is Hole in the Ground. Moreover, the blocking rule and the impressive talent are ignored if a troglodyte moves between tiles using a hole in the ground. So they love to come out of those holes. Lair. Lair is where the Infernal player can always bring into play a troglodyte on this tile. They do not need to take into account the restrictions concerning a tile with an opening or an empty well. So Lair and Lair seems pretty good, but still not as overpowered as Demonic Well, which has even more bonuses for summoning. But that's still cool. Alright, we have a few more. Luminescent Mushrooms. The defense of any warrior on this tile can never be higher than 3. Perhaps the mushrooms are distracting or have a nauseous fume that makes it hard to move and dodge and block. Sanctuary. The human player rolls a die for each of the Infernal warriors who enters this tile. If the resulting value is equal or higher than 5, that warrior suffers a hit. So Sanctuary is just auto demon harmer, possibly. You just roll a 5 and roll a die for each demon enters. 5 or 6 is going to hurt him. Stash. The effect of this tiles are scenario dependent. After resolution of the effect, the player places a triggered effect token on the tile's icon. If nothing is specified in the special rules of the scenario, the tile has no effect. Tomb. This effect is only triggered the first time a human warrior enters this tile. The human player draws an instinct card. After resolving the effect of this tile, the player places a resolved effect token on the tile's icon. So I'm sure it'll be worth it to print out, if it doesn't already come with it, a quick reference for tiles, talents, gifts, and the like. But this all makes sense. Here we have the actual true index there. And, oops, what am I doing? Oh, I see, I went too far. Yeah, and that's the very end of it. So let's look at the credits here. I won't read through all the credits. Just take a look, enjoy, and admire. And let's thank each of these folks, including Croc, with the participation of Laurent Pauchain, hope that's how you say it, and everyone else, Beautiful Art, Pascal Quidot, all these great people. Thank you, all of you. And to everyone watching or listening or whatever to this video, thanks very much for listening. Please feel free to like or subscribe to the video if you want to see more things that might remind you of it, by being board game related, or a guy in his small apartment reading things from a PDF out loud. If that's your cup of tea, I know it's my cup of tea, then subscribe. If it's not, subscribe anyway. It doesn't matter. Whatever. But I am appreciative for hanging out with me during this leisurely pace of reading through the rules. Hopefully, even if you don't know how to play from all this, you at least have such a primer on the rules that when you're explaining it to someone else, or it's being explained to you, the little details and nitty-gritty will appear in your mind, however unconsciously. I wish you all a blessed and gifted and stashed evening. This is Michael Eldridge thanking you for tuning in, and I'll talk with each of you soon, individually.